Hello, friends. Welcome to the end of March, to our History News Live. It is the very, very last day of March, and it's also British summertime. So I have to remember to alter all of my promo stuff to say BST, because it has been GMT. And when the last time the clocks changed, I forgot to change it over. So a lot of people getting BST well into the time that it was GMT. So thank you if you're joining me live. It's lovely to have you here. Thanks for giving up your time. And if you're watching on the playback, thank you for that too. We have got some updates, some repatriation / decolonization news. We've got some new news. We have got a fair few ding-dongs, actually. And we also got some events and exhibitions, some of which are bordering on the ding-dong potentially. So there's a kind of mix and a mismatch occasionally across the themes. I feel that the news cycle has gone further off the boil in some ways. So we will potentially be covering some modern political stuff, because more and more the modern political is bleeding its way into the historical and affecting it. We have got in the description box the articles we're looking at today listed, and they are numbered. You will see those, and those numbers correspond to numbers at the bottom of the slides that are about to be on screen. I have got lots of people to thank for sending me articles, and I am so grateful for everybody that does this. I am sat in front of a rather majestic ruin, the photograph which was sent in by Jackie. Thank you ever so much, Jackie. I wonder if people know where we are. While we're doing that, let's start with some hellos. Let's start off gently before we get into some news that might make my brain explode. Hello, Steve. Thank you so much for joining. Hello, Shane. And also, Steve, I did see your photographs. They were amazing. And we'll be putting one of those up next History News. Shane, I had a wonderful Mother's Day. My husband booked for us to go for a special afternoon tea at a very swanky place. And they gave Gabriel a little lion. And so, yes, we had a lovely day. And then we came home and went to our neighbour's Eid party. So the day, we all got to bed very late, and it was a really good, really fun time. Also, Eid Mubarak for everybody who celebrates. Hello, Medusa. Thank you so much for joining. And Marianne, hello. Makeup Monarchies, hello. And yes, thank you for jumping over from Philippa's live stream. This is my lovely friend with whom I do History After Dark. She is, I believe, going live every other week. So occasionally we will coincide with each other, and she will be on just before me. So do make sure. British History Tours is her channel on YouTube. Do go over and check that out and give her a subscribe. And hopefully, if you click the bell icon there, you should be alerted when she's going live too. As we know, YouTube isn't always reliable on this front. I have seen people saying in my comments that they found that they were unsubscribed. However, on the back end, I am seeing quite a nice little uptick in the growth of our community. In the last, let me just check, in the last 28 days, according to my little app, this channel has grown by just over 1,000 subscribers in the last 28 days. So thank you all so much for being here, for sharing the channel, for talking about it, for being so positive, and for just the interaction that the community gets. It does push things out on YouTube. With that being said, that doesn't mean that YouTube always behaves itself. And despite the growth, I am getting people saying that they are being unsubscribed. So now is an ideal time while we're doing the hellos to check that you are still subscribed if you want to be, and also maybe to subscribe if you're not already, and click that bell icon to be notified. Potentially, sometimes, when YouTube feels like it. Who can tell? There is, of course, my website. If you come to www.katrinamarchant.com, go to the contact page, you can sign up for my mailing list, and that's another way to be alerted as to when I'm doing the live streams, but also when I am putting up my Friday videos too. Hello, Antique Little Girl. Hello from the States. We will be looking at some news items. I'm sorry. Amanda, hello. And Sid, hello. Thank you so much for joining. Carol coming from Telford. It has been lovely in the UK, actually. It's been delightful. Well, thank you, Astrology Talk and Tarot. I'm glad that you managed to join a live. And Leona, hello. Let's see. Jennifer's coming in. Thank you so much for joining. And Amy as well. Thank you. It's so lovely to have you all here. Hello, Lizzie. And Jessie, hello. Celtic Kitty, lovely to have you. Lovely to have you. We've got are you my name twin cat or a different cat? Hello. And are you a cat or a Katrina or a Catherine? I'm a Katrina. But I'm aware that it tends to be a Catherine thing, or maybe a Kathleen thing. So then, let us and another cat, a Catherine cat. My goodness, are we all in? And hang on, we have got there. Tash B, what am I doing in front of Houghton House? Excellent spot. Well done. This is the background sent in from Jackie, and what a fabulous Houghton House. I'm saying Houghton, but it might be Horton. It's spelled like this. This is Bedfordshire. And what a majestic pile she would once have been. Of course, now we see ruined, looked after by the National Trust. If you go onto the National Trust website for this site, they do put up a lot of scary info about falling masonry. Don't climb on anything. Don't breathe on it funny. Don't sneeze in the vicinity. But incredible nonetheless. Just, I suppose, be incredibly careful if you do go and visit. I tend to not say that about historic places, but with the warnings that came from the National Trust on this one, or English Heritage, I was saying National Trust, maybe it's English Heritage. One or the other. Either way, the website warns you off doing anything remotely in the vicinity of this place. Well, it's a cat house. Great minds. Meow. Yes. Thank you, Tash. It is English Heritage, not National Trust. Thank you so much. Had a horrible thought of Henry VIII calling Catherine arrogant cat. Oh, I mean, he could also have called Catherine Howard that, couldn't he? Or Catherine Parr. I think he's supposed to call Catherine Parr Kate. But yeah. The cutesy nickname from Henry VIII. In light of everything that goes on, understandably, do make people feel a little bit ill. Well, hello, friends. Welcome indeed. Let us, without further ado, jump on in, because there have been it's been a month. So we've got many things to cover. I'm going to start off with the thank yous. So thank you, first of all, to Alicia. Thank you for sending in news items. Jessie, Yvonne, Michelle, Kathy, Beth, Elverta, Zoe, Jenna, named Twin Cat, maybe one of you in the comments, Snudpuckle, Rebecca, Natalie, Carol, Louise and Robyn. Thank you ever so much for sending in those news items. And now, without further ado, let us hop in to the update. And we are starting with Pompeii. A rare fresco has been discovered in Pompeii, showing the type of woman who, quote, breaks free from male order to dance freely, go hunting and eat raw meat in the mountains. Same, babe, same. I'm not an outdoorsy person, but never mind. It's been, as we know, Pompeii is doing an enormous amount of excavation work, which is one of the reasons this is in updates. This is another one of the updates that have been found in Pompeii. This was announced at the end of February, and this is the House of Thyasus. This is apparently an almost life-size wall painting that goes along the length of 3 walls in a banqueting hall. There's, as we can see, a bright red background, and there are numerous figures, female figures, followers of Dionysus shown, the god of wine. They are shown as hunters, swords in hand, slaughtered goats on their shoulders. There are also young satyrs, the ones who are part goat, part human, legs goat, body human. Mr. Tumnus, I believe, styly, and they are playing the flute and sacrificing some wine. There is, at the centre of the fresco, there's an old satyr with a young woman who's about to be initiated into the cult of Dionysus. And the only other example of a large fresco depicting these kinds of rites was found in 1909 in a house of the suburbs of Pompeii that is known as the Villa of Mysteries, which sounds incredibly exciting. This discovery, the Italian culture minister pointed out, this discovery is historic. It's an exceptional historic document, and together with the fresco of the Villa of Mysteries is a one of a kind, or maybe a two of a kind, making Pompeii an extraordinary testament to an aspect of classical Mediterranean life that is largely unknown. The house is now on display as part of the tours that are ongoing in the excavations of Pompeii. So if anybody gets a chance to go on any of these excavation tours, do let us know what it's like. If you can drop me a message, maybe, if you've been on one of these tours, if you could perhaps tell us what's covered, because this sounds super fun. Vicky says that she's making costumes for Live Witch of the Wardrobe. This is the fourth time you've heard someone ring up and say, isn't it weird when stuff like that happens, when there's something contextual to your life and then you go into different circumstances and related things pop up. It is weird. The Matrix. The Matrix is matrixing. On that note, another update, and I have highlighted the relevant section. I'm not going to get into the weeds of this because it's not my business to talk about other nations' security clearances any more than it would be my business or within my purview or knowledge to talk about security clearances in this country. Because quite frankly, while I understand the term at broad strokes, I lack the diplomatic, militaristic, or governmental understanding to truly grasp the full range of powers and requirements, and thus what this actually means and what it poses for these individuals and the wider community. However, what I will say is that, if you can see the highlighted section, the Manhattan District Attorney, your friend and mine, Alvin Bragg, the individual who prosecuted and won the criminal hush money case against President Trump last year, has lost his security clearance, among others. Now, as I said, don't know what that means in its entirety. However, because of his presence in our news streams, I feel that it is valuable for me to bring it up. And I'm sure that if you are American or you know anything more than I do about security clearances, you understand the full context of this and what it might mean. Medusa is pointing out that this means that essentially that Alvin Bragg can no longer work if his clearance has been removed, which I wonder. And this is why I don't necessarily want to dive into this, because I under no circumstances, considering frankly the powder keg that's happening on a global level across for a variety of reasons, I don't want to start spitballing and speculating. However, as we know, for our interests, I mean, as a collective, the one thing we all share is history, and we are all, I think, to a certain extent, interested in repatriations. And as we know, Alvin Bragg has been, and his team have been, a cornerstone of that repatriation work. And there are some things that are still in the works. And I do wonder the effect that this might have. So I'm bringing it up because we also have some repatriation news coming out of the States. And I'm now wondering if we might have a change in the story, or maybe even to have to issue a retraction. So I'm flagging it up. With that being said, let's hop into repatriations and see where we're going. And first up, the Manhattan DA's office. Ancient artifacts worth $2.2 million are being returned to Greece and Italy. Question mark? Does the loss of security clearance affect stuff like this? I honestly don't know. I'm asking because I have no idea. The Manhattan DA's office announced the recovery of 2 groups of ancient artifacts that are going to be returned to Greece and Italy. Apparently, one repatriation ceremony took place February 25th for 11 ancient Greek artifacts, and other artifacts that are being returned, though, include a Hellenistic statuette, and there's various things. We're talking stuff from like 1300 to 1200 BCE, the 4th to 3rd century BCE, etc., etc. I also don't know the full timeline of things. Does a repatriation ceremony, is that immediately followed by the things going home with the groups that have come to repatriate, or is there a, in quotes, quarantine period? I also don't know that. There were a collection of the collection of items we're talking about were recovered by the DA's office and are valued at approximately $1 million. This follows the news Alvin Bragg announced on the 18th of February of 107 objects valued at $1.2 million that are going to be sent back to Italy. Going to be sent back. Don't know if they have been yet, not entirely sure. This is coming out of multiple, and keyword here, I feel, ongoing investigations connected to several smugglers of antiquities, and one of the people who is involved is a London-based art dealer named Robin Symes. We have heard that name before. He was convicted of contempt of court for lying about antiquities that he was holding in storage locations across the world. There was also a part of the announcement of charges against somebody called Eduardo Almagia. He was charged and the subject of an arrest warrant. On February 24th, the Met announced it was returning a 7th century bronze head. We'll be talking about that in a second. The museum's researchers have concluded it was likely illegally removed from the Archaeological Museum of Olympia in the 1930s. We will be talking about that in a second. So, continuing on, ProPublica. Again, I have talked about this news source numerous times. I really respect the way they do their journalism. I really respect the length of their articles, the detail that's gone into. They often use lots of very, sounds very shallow, pretty pictures, but useful pictures to illustrate what's going on. So they have done an article that I recommend checking out. Does your local museum or university still have Native American remains? And there is a database they have linked where Native American remains were taken from and which institutions report still having them. What this knowledge of these institutions having them currently will mean, I don't know. However, we're going to be talking about the British Museum in a minute, and I am a firm believer that if all else fails, and when all else looks a bit bleak, you can, in capitalism, vote with your money. That's what I will say. The Art Institute of Chicago has returned a stolen Buddha to Nepal. This is the, in quotes, Buddha sheltered by the serpent king Mulkalinda, and this is a 12th century sculpture that was stolen from the Kathmandu Valley. There was provenance research and collaboration with Nepalese officials that led to this decision. We can see here in the image that Buddha is being protected by the Serpent King during a storm. The Nepalese government have welcomed this move. Quote, "This sacred sculpture is a carrier of stories, traditions and values. Its return strengthens the bond between heritage and community, ensuring future generations can connect with their history." So that has gone back. There we go. A weird one. The first of many. I'm going to be honest with you guys. The first of many weird ones, but this, I have no idea what's going on. I'm not going to pretend to. A painting that was stolen from an Italian museum is found here in England, but apparently its owner fancies keeping it. Okay, so let's jump in. This is a 16th century painting that was stolen more than 50 years ago, which is a while, but not long enough that I feel like this is going to be okay. It's now at the centre of a custody battle between a widow in England and a small Italian museum. This is the Madonna and Child by Antonio Solario, and it was taken in 1973 from the museum. At a later date, it was bought by somebody called Baron de Doza. I don't know who that is, but he had a Tudor manor house in eastern England. It's now in the possession of the late Baron's ex-wife. But it nevertheless is on a database of stolen art maintained by Interpol. The lawyer who is looking into this has vowed to return the painting to the museum, but apparently, as we're going to find out, the individual Baroness de Doza has declined to give up the painting, despite telling the lawyer that she, quote, never really liked it. She doesn't hang it. It reminds her of her ex-husband. Lovely warm feelings there for the man you were married to, who presumably you divorced and then he died. She did not respond to a comment for request from the AP. The local police force, the Norfolk Constabulary, was called, but eventually returned the painting to de Souza. And the police force told the AP that it had been advised by UK judicial authorities to give the artwork back because, quote, several years have passed and there has been no response from Italian authorities in relation to the investigation. It's on Interpol, babe. What? Okay. Paintings by this artist, Solario, who walked across Italy in the 16th century, have sold at auction for several $100,000. But this, we think, is apparently worth less, about £100,000. We are told it's not a Rembrandt. It has value beyond a monetary value. The artist was from the area from which it was taken, and so it's very important to the people. Yeah, I would love to read a court transcript if it got that far. I honestly don't know how an art piece can be on Interpol's database of stolen works and the judiciary is telling a local constabulary not to action it because it's been a long time. All I can say is that class is a big thing in England, and lots of judges hang out with barons and their families because they are barons and their families. And that's what I'm going to say on that. I mean, we don't, if something's on the Interpol database, we don't have the principle of finders keepers. I feel will be that is, if he's bought goods, he's purchased stolen goods. There is no finders keepers if you've purchased stolen property. You've handled stolen property. But yeah, you're right, Oriental Rose. The police hands were absolutely tied because a judge told them to jog on. I would say, I wonder why. Makeup monarchies, is there a statute of limitations of items on the list? Well, I would have, if it has passed it, then presumably they would take it off the Interpol database. I don't believe if it's come out of an institution, then if it's still on the Interpol database, they're still actively looking for it. It might not be prosecutable if the person who stole it is dead or that's past the statute of limitations, but you can still reclaim even if you don't prosecute, I would have thought. On this note, MPs have said that ancestral remains should no longer be displayed in UK museums. This includes Egyptian mummies in the British Museum. It's been referred to as offensive and something that should be stopped, according to MPs. This is a report by the All-Party Group for African Reparations, that they said it should become an offence to sell ancestral remains or to publicly display them without consent. The report is called Laying Ancestors to Rest. It's primarily concerned with African ancestral remains. And it said the possession by museums and universities of body parts brought to the UK as the result of enslavement and colonialism caused profound distress to their descendants, diaspora communities, and countries of origins. It called for remains, including bones, skeletons, skin, hair, and tissue, to be repatriated to their countries of origin wherever possible. The law should also be changed to allow national museums such as the V&A, the Science Museum, Natural History Museum to remove or, quote, deaccession remains in their permanent collections. The chair of this committee said, quote, putting human remains on display is unethical, especially when no consent has been given. I think removing the display of these items ultimately changes the culture. It goes some way to look at them with some form of respect. I wholly and completely agree. Currently, anyone can possess, buy, and sell human body parts as long as they were not acquired illegally and they are not used for transplants, only for, and I swear this is the wording in the article, only for decoration. What in the leather face is that is vile. Okay. So the report also suggests creating a memorial or burial site in the UK for ancestral remains that cannot be returned because their exact origins have been destroyed owing to colonial violence. And then we've got a British Museum spokesman who says, quote, the Museum is mindful of ethical obligation and closely follows the guidance set out by the Department of Cultural, Media and Sport and the Human Tissue Act of 2004, which ensures that human remains held in its care are always treated and displayed with respect and dignity. Cute. Oriental Rose points out, this is about the portrait lady, the Italian government can't sue an individual and she can claim her ex-husband left it to her. It's still being hotly debated in the UK. Oh, that's interesting. So even if he's purchased stolen goods, because she inherited it, well, I hope they sue her and they win. She doesn't even like it. She's just being spicy. Some would argue that displaying her at all lacks dignity. I would agree. And I think particularly the where I always come down on it with remains, and especially remains that have been exhumed from culturally significant burial sites, but I think all remains in general, is that one thing we know for sure is that it was not the intention of the individual who was buried or the people who buried them, interred them in whatever form, that they would ever be displayed in the way they are in the British Museum. And particularly with communities and burial practices that we know a lot about, for example, pharaonic burial practices, this is a complete anathema to what they had in mind. So, yeah. Manda, how old remains have to be considered ancestral? That's an excellent question, to which I have no idea. Dead enough to be dead? Old enough to be dead? I mean, your grandma is your ancestor. And when we're talking about things that were done in Canada, Australia, in the kind of, in quotes, reform schools, and the hair sampling that was taken in the early 20th century, that's got to be ancestral remains. But I don't know what the date range is. Manda also asks, what about some of the anatomical remains of Victorian children used for teaching? I mean, with medical museums, I can't get into the bioethics of teaching people who are going to go on to become doctors with human remains. I would say, though, if those remains are stolen, it's very questionable, because people do donate their remains to science all the time. So there is that. What I think is absolutely should not be the case is I don't think they should be on display. I don't think they should be on display. Crystal candelabras, vases, fancy vases and bones. Just the fancy of decor choices. I mean, it's wild. It's absolutely wild that you can legally trade in human remains as long as they were not obtained illegally, and you're only using them for decoration. Wow. Wow. The Seattle Stitcher, you wonder if that includes furniture that was stuffed with things like human hair. I've seen things like that in the antebellum South. You absolutely have. And if I would say that hair is absolutely ancestral remains, particularly when hair has the significance that it has within certain ancestral communities and practices. So Oriental Rose, your parents, your antecedents, your great-grandparents, your ancestors. So basically anything from, theoretically, from grandparents back would be ancestral remains. Steve, it's all very grey, the human remains issues. Well, the bones are white. But yeah, I think there's, I think that there has to be some grey areas, potentially. However, when it comes to profiting off of human remains that did not and could not have given consent, for me, that is a very binary issue. There is an ethical standpoint and there is an unethical standpoint. And I'm a big believer that unless there's a real legal or ethical issue, those who expect to rest in peace should be left to do so. Hi, Pistolani. Nice. You come in at a lovely point. We're talking about people using human remains as decoration. Welcome. Carol, does that include the skull they used in Hamlet? As Manda points out, there was a skull that was donated in somebody's will to, I believe, the RSC. And if everybody involved consents to that, and that's what you want to do with your skull, crack on. Look, I am, if there were a body farm in the UK, that is what I would like to be done with me. I would like to help solve moiders. Unfortunately, as of yet, I believe they're in talks to have one, but as of yet, there is no body farm. And I think the argument is that there's not enough space to actually have one that people couldn't, fly drones over and generally be gross about. But so I'm not adverse to human remains being used. I'm an organ donor. I would like to be part of a body farm. So, Jennifer would happily leave their body to play a good prank. Look, prop it up, drive it in the car, have a good time. I get that. What I don't get is the lack of consent. Yeah, Jennifer, Weekend at Bernie's is actually absolutely what I had in mind. Yeah, Weekend at Bernie's it. Fine. If you consent to that, write yourself a will. I am all for that. But if you don't consent, and if you're unable to consent because you couldn't even conceive of it, it is time for that not to be on display. Yes, John Merrick. And there's also a model of his remains on display as well. And another individual who I believe he had gigantism. whose worst fear, he told friends in life, was being anatomized and displayed. And that was his worst fear, and it absolutely happened. So yeah, I think that it's a no thank you from me. On the topic of the British Museum, and for a long time, we sort of tiptoed around the issue of who was responsible for what was going on and the refusal to repatriate. And I was perhaps overly kind, thinking that, you know, I understood what the previous government and their policies were slightly more nationalistic. I think there was an overarching drive to keep what's British British and claim things as British that weren't British. And it was very, you know, the empire wasn't all that bad. But it seems that this is not for me, the buck is now more firmly passed to the museum with the appointment of Dr. Tiffany Jenkins to the lineup of trustees. Now, what is worth pointing out is that the board of trustees, some are appointed by government, by MPs, I believe in the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. However, 10 are appointed by other board members. I don't know which one she is. However, the reason why I'm now cocking an eyebrow at this prospect is that this individual is the author of a book called Keeping Their Marbles: How the Treasures of the Past Ended Up in Museums, ... and why they should stay there. She examined the influences behind the high-profile battle to return museum artifacts in an attempt to repair historical wrongs. While she has got a book to sell, and thus I'm sure she's going to very much stick to this standpoint, she is, of course, criticised, and she's criticised by a variety of people. For example, the Greek culture minister Lena Mindoni, we know, is a strong opponent of this, and recently she was interviewed by Dr. Alice Roberts, who recently told the Radio Times of the marbles, quote, "They belong back in Athens. It's not equivalent, but I imagine we might be upset if another country had significant bits of Stonehenge and wouldn't give them back. But actually, the argument goes deeper than that. There's a pressing need to recognise some of the questionable practices of the past, which often went hand in hand with the history of colonialism." I absolutely agree. The British response to calls to return these and repatriate these items has been based on the idea that the removal was legal and that the British Museum is the, quote, safest custodian. Okay, cute. You had people selling items from your museum on eBay. Adorbs. Greece recently moved away from simply claiming ownership and said that there was an idea about reunification, that the marbles should be with their other marbles, and I also agree with that. Jenkins, the new appointee, is an honorary fellow at the University of Edinburgh, and she was congratulated on her appointment by one Claire Fox, who is her colleague at the Academy of Ideas. This is a think tank founded by Fox 25 years ago, Claire Fox 25 years ago, on the closure of living Marxism. It's non-party political, but it promotes what it describes as, quote, a robust stance on contentious issues. Jenkins was solely concerned with the serious business of protecting history and would, quote, not be joining the board to fight any external battles. Okay, babe. The Culture Secretary last July, Lisa Nandy, announced a drive to attract the widest pool of talents to the public appointment centre system. Announcing the appointments, the Culture Minister Chris Bryant said, quote, public appointees help to lead some of the UK's best-known institutions, and these immense talented individuals with a wide range of personal and professional experience will make great contributions to how they are run and help promote British soft power abroad. Christopher, if that is your real name, it may not be, he might just be a Chris. What I'm going to say to you is, in the current climate, having somebody who thinks that we got them, so they're ours, and we shouldn't have a conversation about it, and they shouldn't go back. In the current climate, where repatriation is very much the order of the day, when being there are reasons to keep us at arm's length when we don't want to be kept at arm's length. If you actually want to further a sharing of knowledge and international and interinstitutional good feeling and goodwill, you need to turn this particular car around. You need to turn this car around. So, Jessie says, looking at the British government website, apparently she was appointed by the government. Okay. So maybe the institution at hand is the discussions that we've had where we think perhaps it might be more in favour of returning and repatriating. Maybe that was a forlorn hope, as to be honest, so many things are. Steve, the British Museum is said to be desperately losing its marbles over the issue. Yes. Lol, indeed. Lol, indeed. US museums cooperate more with each other, more like a lending library and less like a politics of optics. I agree. I on the one hand, I believe that so much of this stuff is the world's history, and thus we all have a stake in it. With that being said, I think that the appropriate way to best understand all of these pieces, whether it's the Parthenon sculptures, whether it's the Benin bronzes, whatever it may be, the best place to understand it is within the context of the culture from which it came, where these items are being cared for, described, educated on, maybe experimented on, whatever it may be, by individuals who have the closest connection culturally with them. Jets, I think it's more important the artists get where they're most likely best cared for. I agree. I just don't think that's necessarily the British Museum. I think that Athens, that Greece can be entirely responsible, as they already are caring for a whole host of Parthenon sculptures in a fabulous institution that is climate controlled and all the good things that it needs to be. And the same with the Benin bronzes. The new Edo State Museum is going to be absolutely perfect for what it needs to do. And so we must, I feel, this is I think this is a sign of where the British Museum is standing. It may also equally be a sign of where the government is standing. And if that is something that individuals disagree with, again, you can potentially vote with your wallets or your purses. Now, the British Museum is free to enter, but they do have paid exhibitions. They have got memberships. They do sell publications and books, and they sell great publications and books. I think that within capitalism, perhaps the quickest and cleanest way for you to make your displeasure about certain policies clear is to vote with your wallets. It is up to you whether or not you choose to do so. Jennifer, there's absolutely no evidence of that at all. In fact, there have been questions about, I believe a few months, maybe a year ago, there were some questions about a leaky roof in the British Museum, allegedly in the room where the Parthenon sculptures are being kept. There's nothing to suggest that the Greek Museum would not be able to conserve it. And when it comes to the conservations done by the British when they first arrived, that did involve cleaning the sculptures of the paint residues in some respects, scouring them, in fact. On to the new news now. We have got the earliest evidence for humans in rainforests apparently rewrites prehistory. This is new research that's shown that humans were living in African rainforests more than 100,000 years earlier than previously thought. There's an international team of researchers that are rewriting our understanding of prehistoric ancestors and how they lived. They found evidence that people were living in a rainforest in the modern day Côte d'Ivoire around 150,000 years ago. Humans originated in Africa around 300,000 years ago, but the ecological and environmental context of human evolution are still little understood. Rainforests have often been overlooked in searching for the answers. One of the researchers explains, quote, before our study, the oldest secure evidence for habitation in African rainforests was around 18,000 years ago, and the oldest evidence of rainforest habitation anywhere came from Southwest Asia about 70,000 years ago. This pushes back the oldest known evidence of humans in rainforests by more than double the previously known estimate, which is super interesting and super cool. The study has identified the oldest known association between humans and rainforests and has highlighted the importance of Africa's diverse regions and ecosystems in human evolution. The researchers used several dating techniques, including optically stimulated luminescence and electron spin resonance. I don't know what either of those things are. I'm not going to pretend that I do. This is done on mineral grains in the sediments, and this allowed them to arrive at a date of roughly 150,000 years ago. The region, according to analyses, was heavily wooded with pollen, silica phytoliths, and leaf waxes which were typical for humid West African rainforest. Quote, we now know that people in prehistoric times lived in a variety of ecosystems, including rainforests, and we can start to ask questions about human alteration of these environments and how the plants and animals in these wet tropical rainforests may have been altered in the deep past. MJ, those are apparently dating processes like carbon dating. Thank you very much. So, very interesting. Next up, Indigenous elders decode ancient rock art filled with shamans spiritually transforming into animals. I think this is really interesting. Archaeologists have finally deciphered the meaning of a series of prehistoric rock art images with the help of local Indigenous elders and ritual specialists. And in many ways, this returns back to what I was saying about the value of repatriation on the basis of it actually being best for the artifact, because when something is, quote, in country, where it came from, where it originated from, the community knowledge, the oral traditions, all of those things, they are there in ways that can contextualize and conceptualize and breathe life into objects and items in ways that we can't even conceive of, because in some cases culturally there is a level of distinction that just means that you aren't seeing the thing in exactly the same way. So this is the Seriana de la Lindosa. This is a 12-mile-long sandstone outcrop that is in Colombia's Guavere department. And these are thousands of red ochre paintings, some of which date back over 11,000 years. Over the last century, research in this region was obstructed by political unrest and inaccessibility. But in 2016, there was a peace agreement between the Colombian government and FARC, or FARC, and archaeologists could resume their work. They looked at rock art sites, images of humans, animals, mythological creatures, etc., etc. University of Exeter, the Universidad de Antioquia, and the Universidad Nacional de Colombia are involved in publishing this archaeological work. They did 6 years of field work, and they took on a multidisciplinary approach, combining ethnographic research, Indigenous perspectives, and a detailed analysis of the artwork's motifs. they collaborated with local Indigenous communities. And through doing so, they found that the ancient paintings were not simply a record for environmental observations, but also they had a hidden spiritual dimension that shamans navigate by transforming into animals. This concept, a part of Indigenous Amazonian cosmology, suggests that the physical body acts as an outer shell, concealing the true essence of a living being. The interpretation of ritual transformations is supported by multiple scenes depicting therianthropic figures, so humans transforming into snakes, jaguars, or birds. This conclusion would not have been possible without the help of Indigenous elders who were able to aid the researchers in understanding the true spiritual significance behind these images. One of the lead researchers said, quote, "It is the first time that the views of Indigenous elders on their ancestors' rock art have been fully incorporated into research in this part of the Amazon. In so doing, it enables us not simply to look at the art from an outsider's perspective and guess. We know why specific motifs were painted and what they mean." Chris, didn't anyone think of asking the elders years ago? According to this researcher, apparently not. And I think that there is a need to point to and comment on the, I believe, ultimately fraudulent belief that some communities and some groups are able to interact with their work, whether it's scientific, historical, etc., without bias. That there is something special about certain communities, usually those doing anthropological work, archaeology, etc., that they are special in that they don't bring biases to it. And of course, as we know, that's not the case. And I think perhaps a reticence to engage with and to ask elders from these communities in the past may have been based in a belief, an arrogance perhaps about what it meant to be a researcher and what was valuable in terms of creating articles for publication. Perhaps. I don't want to tar everybody with the same brush, but I agree with you. I don't know quite why it's taken till now, except for that the studies of it may well have been imperiled and weakened by how individuals adopted and performed field work. I mean, some of the back history of anthropology that my husband's told me about, some of the shenanigans that went on in anthropology, and as we know, for the love of God, in Egyptology, some of the shenanigans, and that's putting it mildly, that when British, European, American boots got on the ground, yeah, the belief that it wasn't complex, the belief that essentially all cultures have similar stories and mythic origins, that, you know, you can look at something and of course it's pictures, you can understand it in a way that you can understand all other pictures. I think we still see it in the idea of somebody. It's more recently, for example, when there's been a grave and they found remains that are female and she, for example, has a sword. For years, the assumption was that the sword was there for some ritual purpose. Whereas, as more and more, for example, women became researchers, they went, or maybe she was also a fighter. And it's those sorts of, it takes new eyes on the existing perception that you come to it with, that you come with your own biases, you come with your own education, your own family upbringing, the myths and the faiths and the things that you have been enmeshed in from your formative months and years. You are incapable, no matter what people might think, of divorcing yourself from that when it comes to do any kind of field work. Samantha Kate only done first and second anthropology, and yeah, you're correct, even in the basics. I mean, there was some participant observation stories that are so wildly unethical. It is just insane. I mean, even the thing about I believe there's something going around about kind of the notion of wolf packs and alphas and all of this kind of stuff, that it fitted a particular narrative. But my understanding is that that's only the case within animals in captivity that are behaving weirdly because they're in captivity. An 11,000-year-old settlement of Canada could rewrite, again, the history of Indigenous civilizations in North America. This is in, I know how to pronounce this. If it comes out wrong, I apologize. Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan. Is that how that's said? Saskatchewan. An 11,000-year-old settlement in Canada is challenging the idea that Indigenous people were nomadic, which is certainly something that I know does the round a lot. Thank you, Makeup and Monarchies. Saskatchewan. Yes. Good. Huzzah. Huzzahs all round. So this is a village site, which I am not even going to attempt to pronounce it. I apologize, but it means a place to cross in Cree. It is one of the oldest archaeological sites on the continent, and it suggests an organized society existed in central Canada far earlier than experts previously thought. Quote, this site is shaking up everything we thought we knew and could change everything we thought we knew and could change the narrative of early Indigenous civilizations in North America. The evidence uncovered already includes stone tools, fire pits, bison bones. The very large fire pit suggests that the site was used for a long period or repeatedly for shorter periods. An archaeologist at the University of Saskatchewan, I'm very proud I can now pronounce that, so there we go, is the person who said this. And they also point out that it indicates the settlement was likely a long-term one rather than a temporary hunting camp. We are told the discovery is a powerful reminder that our ancestors were here, building, thriving, and shaping the land long before the history books acknowledged us. This site speaks for us. This is SLFN Chief Christine Longjohn. This site speaks for us, proving that our roots run deep and unbroken. Oh, on the wolf thing, it's because the wolves in the captivity were all from different packs, and they were just put in the same enclosure together. And people started analysing the behaviour of these wolves as if it was somehow natural. And I think they liked wolves because we domesticated dogs, and so they thought that was meaningful. Holocomification, pyophytes are only for ritual purposes. Yes. Correct. They are. You must use them cautiously and carefully, those pyophytes, because otherwise, and don't get them confused with a fire pit under any circumstances, because then you're in trouble. What I love is I could pronounce Saskatchewan, but I could not pronounce fire pit. Brian, why are they using the caveat of could in the headline? I think it's because the research is still ongoing. I think it also probably when peer review comes in, as is often the case, if not, I'm not going to say always, because historians don't like to say always and scientists don't like to say always. That's another reason why we use words like could. I am going to say that when peer review comes in on any of these things, particularly from this long ago, but also with stuff that happens way more recently, there's always going to be people that will argue against it and say that the whole thing is hokum and hasn't been properly researched, and for this reason, and they'll always say that there's another way to interpret the evidence that's been found. So, thusly. I'm talking about this, but as I said, I've heard some stuff coming out of things happening in Egypt from archaeologists that I follow on social media who are involved in the world. I'm not an archaeologist, but there's some stuff. There's some stuff going on with this, with the Egypt finds, that questions are being asked. So, with that being said, this headline: last undiscovered tomb of Tutankhamun's dynasty has been found. This is a royal tomb of the 18th Egyptian dynasty, which includes the famous pharaoh Tutankhamun. This is King Thutmose III's tomb. This is apparently they said this is the first time that a pharaoh's tomb has been found by a British-led excavation since Tutankhamun's was found over a century ago. There is but then it says there's a correction. The headline of this text has been amended to reflect the discovery of Thutmose II's tomb not being the first since Tutankhamun's, which was claimed by the Egyptian tourism minister. Others, including those of Sunesis I, Amenope, and Shoshek II, have also been found. So I think this is the first found by a British team. Researchers had thought the burial chambers of the 18th dynasty pharaohs were more than 2 kilometres away, closer to the Valley of the Kings. We're told, quote, part of the ceiling was still intact, a blue painted ceiling with yellow stars on it. And blue painted ceilings with yellow stars are only found in kings' tombs. The mummified remains of Thutmose II had been found 2 centuries ago, but the original burial site was never located. Thutmose II is best known for being the husband of Queen Hatshepsut, regarded as one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs and one of the few female pharaohs who ruled in her own right. We are told a very large staircase and descending corridor that took them some time to get through. They crawled through a 10-meter passageway with a 40-centimeter gap in the top that got into the burial chamber. Again, evidence that these people wanted to be left alone. And if you could not waterboard me into crawling into that space. Maybe there are people who go potholing or whatever, caving, people who willingly climb under. They have got their feet on the good earth, and they willingly climb in a cave or a hole. Could not be me. A few things that give me cold sweats. That guy who got stuck in the Nutty Putty cave, when I see pictures of how he was stuck, it makes me feel ill. Machines underwater or statues underwater, I think it's submachanophobia or something. I don't like it. Space. Those people that were supposed to be up there for a week got stuck up there for 9 months, ill, immediately not. And also just generally, submarines, no. None of it. None of those things. I'll get in a plane. I'm not going to bungee jump. I'm not going to jump out of a plane. No. Is that what it's called, Samantha? Spelunking. Either way, it can spelunk right off. Not a chance. Not a chance. I'm a bit afraid when I go and tour a mine. I'm like, this feels like a bad choice. Look. Julesy, that's it. The idea of squeezing through a hole in the ground like a birth canal makes me ill. Yes. And it's for me, it's the thing of there's the one that makes me feel deeply unwell is when you've got to swim for a bit of it. So there's like a tube full of water and I could never have been a marine for multiple reasons. I don't like the outdoors. I'm unfit and I can't follow directions to save my life. I have a problem with authority. But a hole full of water that you've got to swim through in the dark, you can You can take several seats. That's never happening for me. That's never. I would rather take off. I'd rather unzip my own skin and climb out. Not a chance. Medusa's tried crawling down storm drains. I mean, do you not see it? What are you doing? And this, I mean, is the only excuse, frankly. This is the only excuse. Tripping. Has to be tripping. I like adventure playgrounds that are above ground and do not have spaces that are so small that you are not high up either. I don't really like them high up. Above ground, but not too high. Not too high up. Not too. How much money to get you to? You could offer to pay off my mortgage and give me a cool billion. I would not be in one of these places. I could not. Patty, welcome to a Weird Live. I'm talking about things I'd rather do than go in the Nutty Putty Cave, which doesn't feel particularly historical, but it's connected to this utter hellscape of a thing where we've been told that somebody crawled through a 10-meter passageway that had a small 40-centimeter gap at the top. Immediately no. But nevertheless, they found this blue ceiling. They knew they were in a royal chamber, but this tomb turned out to be completely empty. Not that it was robbed, but it had been deliberately emptied. The tomb had then been flooded. Ooh, immediately ill. Oh, I don't like it. So they did find some artifacts, fragments of alabaster, probably broken when the tomb was being moved. These are the artifacts of the first objects associated with Thutmose II's burial. The team involved has previously excavated 54 tombs in the western part of the Theban mountain of Luxor and established identities of more than 30 royal wives and court women. There are, I think, going to be loads more stories coming out about the finds in Egypt. The Grand Egyptian Museum has a website. You can book tickets. It's happening. It's finally happening. So lots of these finds, I think, are going to be on... I've just seen a comment that's made my blood run cold, and it's this one. It's this one from Gandalf Cal. I don't even know what the Devil's Hole in Nevada is, but it's made me feel sweaty. It's made me feel sweaty. Amber, all these finds in Egypt, absolutely exciting. I am going to caveat it with the hubbub that's going on in some archaeology circles that I'm very much. I'm so far on the fringes that I'm almost in another county, but I'm watching, and there's some stuff that there are questions being asked about how quickly things are being announced, what they're being determined to be, and why. I think there are some questions about the rapidity of this stuff. However, what I will say is there is a lot of, it feels almost a similar rapidity of stuff coming out of Pompeii, and I'm not seeing the same level of questioning. So just flagging it with a make up your own mind, because I don't know. And Samantha, I won't put that on the screen, but you haven't got to apologise, because that is my sense of humour too. Coming up next is also some nightmare fuel. These upset me. I found these. If I found these in my loft, I'd be startled. I can see that they have a beauty to them, but there is something about shooting them on a black background that does make me feel quite upset. Yeah, Medusa, that's the stuff, the Cleopatra stuff, and everything being connected to Cleopatra. There's a lot of stuff we're being told is Cleopatra or Cleopatra adjacent, or they're trying to like shoehorn a connection to Cleopatra that I have questions about. Yeah. Samantha, they do feel a bit haunted. But I can also agree with you, MJ. There is a strange beauty to them. However, on a dark night, if the moon hit them and that's how you saw them, I would be upset. Oh, so what we have here is these are clay puppets with open mouths and detachable heads. That's, to me, that's the thing. It's the detachable head factor. They resemble modern toy dolls. This has been found in El Salvador. These, incredibly, they are 2,400 years old. So it's thought they're going to shed light on an ancient Mesoamerican society. These are called Belinus or Belinus figurines. They have open mouths. The two smallest are about 4 inches and 7 inches, while the other three stand at a foot tall. And immediately in my head, I'm like, Chucky. I don't know why. I went, haunted doll, foot tall, Chucky. The detachable heads with small holes apparently allow for a string to be passed through the neck and tied on top of the head. So these are danglers. They're clay actors. Even when the people involved says when you hold them in your hand, sometimes they look creepy because of their vivid expressions. You shift your gaze a little bit, and it seems like, oof, this thing almost moved. No, Lord. Apparently, very little is known about the identities and ethno-linguistic affiliations of the creators of ancient settlements that predate the arrival of Europeans in the 16th century, and it only gets worse the further back you go. This finding is only the second group found in situ, and it's the first to feature a male figure. The male puppet, appears to be sporting some kind of facial tattoos. The other 4 are female. In Mesoamerican thought, still visible today, to recreate something was to actually create it. So if a ruler decided to commission a sculpture of himself, he was effectively cloning himself, allowing himself to look over his people even when he was away. So it's thought perhaps these puppets is super protective. Figurines like this have been found in Guatemala and elsewhere in El Salvador, and jade pendants unearthed nearby resemble similar artifacts discovered in present-day Nicaragua, Panama, and Costa Rica. So there's a thought process that the ancient inhabitants of San Isidro may have been connected to distant peoples. We're also told this discovery contradicts the prevailing notion about El Salvador's cultural backwardness or isolation in ancient times. It reveals the existence of a vibrant and far-reaching communities capable of exchanging ideas with remarkably distant places. Oriental, I think maybe they could be like a talisman. And I wonder, are they in some kind of puppet theatre, or as you could suspend them from the head, are they like? Would it be worse if they were at ground level, like feet touching the floor, or would it be creepier if they were like dangling above you and you saw, or at eye level? I don't know. I don't know. Now this next one, right? This is where my ethics about how I do this news show. I didn't know what to do with this one. I spoke to my husband about it because the picture I've covered in that blue box, and of course you can look at it yourselves. It is the vitrified brain. It is the glass that was found in this individual's skull. Now, as it's supposed to be his brain that has become glass, question mark, I counted that as human remains. I don't know if I'm right to do so. Samantha, yes. Well, do you know what? I'll look at the story. I'll have a look at the story that we've got before because I fear that I've buried the lead here. So, Vesuvius volcanic eruption, very hot, as we are aware. And in 2020, researchers found glass, and they speculated that it was fossilized or glazed brain, but they didn't know how it had been formed. This was found inside the skull of a victim. He was about 20 when he died. Apparently, scientists have now questioned whether the cloud of hot ash, which apparently reached 510 degrees C. Don't ask me to change to Fahrenheit because I don't even know. I know that's really hot. That's like big boiling. That's 5 times boiling. It enveloped the brain and then very quickly cooled them down, turning the organ into glass. Quote, we believe the very specific conditions that we have reconstructed for the vitrification of the brain made it difficult for there to be other similar remains, although not impossible. The fragments of glass found range from 1 to 2 centimeters to just a few millimeters in size. They think that actually Vesuvius's hot ash is likely what caused the most of the deaths. What they say is that the ash cloud turned this man's brain into glass because the pyroclastic flow would not have reached high enough temperatures or cooled quickly enough. Glass has very specific temperature conditions to occur. So there has to be a huge temperature difference between the substance and its surrounding. They point out that no other parts of the man's body are believed to turn to glass. Only material carrying some liquids can turn to glass. Other soft tissues like organs are destroyed by the heat before they can cool down enough. So they think the skull is what gave them protection. This research is published in the scientific journal. However, there are those that are massively questioning it. So that's the story. Count Valerian of House Tatters, thank you ever so much for the super chat. What they have found glass in the place of a skull. They believe it's brain. They think they have come across a solution by which it would have transformed. I am not going to pretend to know what this is. I see that there are lots of people who would view this as human remains. I did, even though, as Steve points out, it's really weird to think that a brain can turn to glass. Sand, lightning in sand, glass, yeah. Baker Monarchy says, done the maths, 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's April Fool's Day tomorrow, and what's hilarious is, friends, I am having a wisdom tooth out tomorrow afternoon. I've had a lot of antibiotics. I currently have, I've just got over a nasty infection, but the tooth has to be pulled. So I'm losing a wisdom tooth tomorrow on April Fool's Day. I'm feeling some ways about that. Samantha, yeah, the ash cloud, like, I hope it was quick, because it must have been so hot, so fast. But my God, how terrifying. The sand in the brain thing, I don't. Brian Valka, it doesn't make a lot of sense to turn brains glass. They claim it was. Charles VI did. That is one of the things he apparently believed he was made of glass. I'll be honest, I'm not looking forward to it. The old dental surgery. I'm having it done in the dentist office, so hopefully he can pull it without us requiring a surgical intervention. It has fully erupted. I did have my other wisdom tooth pulled many moons ago in the dentist office. I haven't got wisdom tooth in the bottom, so even before the infection, this was annoying me because it's longer because it hasn't got a tooth to impact on. So it's a pain in the bums. Everybody's bums. Also, I have a really fun trip planned for the day after, so I hope I'm not going to be too miserable. Chris points out that pyroclastic flows are no joke. Evidently, they sound deeply upsetting, but hopefully it would result in a speedy demise. That's, I think, the only possible thing that might be something that help it out. Manda, they're pulling the whole tooth. They're pulling the whole thing. So, yay! It's good. It's good. I will. Let's just hope that the aesthetic lasts. I have a bit of a tendency for anesthesia to wear off. In the past, when I've had to have dental stuff done, they've had to re-anesthetize me halfway through because I've gone, I can now feel that. So, good. I'll make them aware of that. I'm sure I'll be fine. What's the worst that could happen? Hey? A study reveals that Greek and Roman statues were not only painted and adorned with textiles, they were also perfumed. Once again, we're coming back to my new favourite topic of olfactory reconstruction and olfactory archaeology. I love it. This is a study in the Oxford Journal of Archaeology that's revealed that ancient art used perfumes and aromatic substances in their Greco-Roman sculptures. I love it. So these were not only polychromed and adorned with textiles and jewellery, they were also impregnated with fragrances. This is documented in literary and epigraphic texts, suggesting that the sensory experience of ancient spectators was much richer than previously thought. The research based on a series of classical texts describing how statues of gods and illustrious figures were perfumed. So Cicero mentions the custom of anointing the statue of Artemis with perfumes. Likewise, Callimachus describes in an epigram that the statue of Berenice, the second queen of Egypt, was, quote, moist with perfume. They were not only to beautify, but they also had a ritual function. It's about honouring these gods, potentially. It's sacrificial with exotic fragrances and scented oils. And of course, anointing with oils is something that makes its way through to Christianity and in particularly into the coronation. So Charles III was anointed with holy oils using the ampulla and spoon. There is a belief that there's a connection between the perfume workshops discovered in Delos, and for those of you who watched my video on Mappa Mundi, we talked about how some of these Mappa Mundi medieval maps of the world were focused on Delos and the practice of perfuming statues. So I would love it if we could have like reconstructed sense of all of this stuff. How cool is that? This is a part of a symbolic and religious language that endowed sculptures with a more tangible presence. And it might explain why these images were so venerated and why their preservation and embellishment were considered acts of devotion. I love that. So interesting. A Roman brooch was apparently buried to defend an Iron Age house. This is underneath an air-shear distillery. It's an enamelled bronze brooch that they think was placed in the foundations of a fortified roundhouse as a sacrifice during its construction, aimed at granting protection to the household. It was found during an excavation in 2020. And it's hoped that this will shine a light on the way that people of ancient Scotland interacted with Roman soldiers who were guarding Hadrian's Wall. This brooch is a popular design among Roman military personnel, but examples of artifacts are more commonly discovered in present-day Central Europe. So this would have arrived in Scotland at about the time the Roman Empire was losing its grip on the south of the country. The Romans left Scotland in about 210 AD, but they did remain in Britain for a further 200 years. It's possible that this was a trophy won in battle. I think it's also equally possible that it might have been traded in some way, shape, or form, or even stolen. But it's likely that the household that it was buried beneath would have been that of a wealthy farming family. Quote, these brooches were particularly popular among members of the Roman military forces, so it's likely it came north of Hadrian's Wall on the cloak of a Roman soldier tasked with garrisoning the empire's northernmost frontier. It's difficult to say exactly why the brooch was deposited within the palisade trench, but we know that a ritualized foundation offerings are observed across many cultures, typically enacted to grant protection to a household, and that is certainly a possibility here. Julesy, yeah, the blue is incredible, isn't it? Just absolutely glorious. It is a beautiful piece. The Sutton Hoo helmet may apparently come from Denmark, an archaeologist suggests. A metal detectorist in Denmark has raised questions about the origins of the Sutton Hoo helmet because he found a small metal stamp on an island in southern Denmark with similar markings to those on the famous helmet. The BBC were told that if the helmet is indeed proved to have come from Denmark, it could change our understanding of the balance of power in 7th century Northern Europe. Sutton Hoo is thought to be the burial site of King Raedwald, an East Anglian ruler who died in 624 AD. This site was first excavated in 1939, at which time more than 260 artifacts were uncovered. The helmet is now housed in the British Museum and is decorated with various motifs. It's believed to have been influenced by earlier Roman style, and historians previously thought that it came from Uppland in eastern Sweden. But researchers at the National Museum of Denmark have said that the unearthed stamps have got a striking similarity to the helmet's motifs. They've got a green-tinged copper alloy stamp that was found 2 years ago. And the motif, we're told, is a very powerful image, which is so similar to what we see in Sutton Hoo. Similar motifs have also been found in Germany. This is the first to be found in Denmark. The piece was handed to a local museum, but it's only recently been studied. It's 5 centimeters by 4 centimeters, and it's thought to be a stamp or a die, also known as a patrice. It's not identical to Sutton Hoo helmet, but there are many similarities. There, on it, we've got a horse, and it's the same horse. He thinks the Sutton Hoo and Danish motifs are closer than their Swedish counterparts, suggesting that the helmets might originate from or around the Danish island. The next steps are there's going to be 3D scanning of the motifs, and it is going to go on display in Copenhagen in April, so next month. Yes, on that stone, lapis lazuli would have had to be imported from Afghanistan, or the jewel would have had to be imported from Afghanistan. Absolutely. A fragment of the Bayeux Tapestry has been rediscovered in Germany, interestingly. This piece was found in the Schleswig-Holstein State Archives in Schleswig, which is a northern town in Germany. It belonged to the local estate of the local archaeologist, a man called Karl Schlabau, and he had been part of a German group of scientists who had been commissioned by a Nazi organization for the promotion of racist pseudoscientific theories in an attempt to, he was asked to remeasure the tapestry in 1941. And apparently this fragment was removed from the textile's underside during this work, so a bit got robbed off of it. This fragment is going to be repatriated to France, and because it is, the tapestry is a French cultural asset. The medieval textile is a UNESCO Memory of the World Heritage Asset, so very important and protected. The artifact is currently housed at the Bayeux Museum in Normandy, and it's only left Bayeux twice. It went to Paris, the Louvre, and then it returned to the Louvre in World War II when France was under German occupation as well. The 8 feet by 10 feet of the Bayeux Tapestry, this piece has been missing for centuries. It's not known why this section, which may have depicted William's coronation as the new King of England on Christmas Day 1066, was removed, or where it might be. This newly rediscovered fragment is unlikely to make much of a dent in recovering the textiles of its original glory. The Bayeux Tapestry is going to close for 2 years of restoration work starting this August 31st, 2025, reopening late in 2027 to celebrate the 1,000 years since the Conqueror's birth in 1028. So the piece of the Bayeux Tapestry that I'm not sure if that's going to be part of this restoration, although as it's going back, presumably it's going to be added on. We shall see. Steve, if they had even a single solitary leg to stand on, I believe they would. I believe they would. Lol, indeed. A hidden manuscript of King Arthur and Merlin has been found after 400 years. This has been found hidden inside another book at the Cambridge University Library. This is a manuscript known as the Suite Vulgate de Merlin, so the Vulgate Suite of Merlin. It's about King Arthur and Merlin, written about 1230. Much of it's been lost. There's only a small fragment. This is Merlin, a shapeshifter, who at one point turns into a blind harpist, then a child who commands the king. Arthur in this apparently is described for some reason as not wearing underwear. This has been tucked away inside another book for about 400 years, and it was repurposed as a book cover. Then, during some multispectral imaging and CT scanning, they unfolded the manuscript without ripping the ancient paper. It's so advanced, they could read the text with visual enhancements. Researchers don't know who they think wrote it, but they think it might have been a collaborative project with several authors contributing to the legend. And with the whole, do you know what? With the whole no pants thing, what it reminds me of is when you when you write a bit of a story and then you fold the paper over and then your mate writes the next sentence, and it's like, and then Merlin became a blind harpist, fold, and then he was a child who ordered the king about. Blah. The king was not wearing any knickers. But I'm a child. That's how I think of it. This is the collaborative project. If you think sequels are a plague on our culture today, take heart in knowing they've always been around, as this long-forgotten story about Merlin and Arthur is positioned to us as a sequel to a text written about 30 years prior. They really were striking while the iron was hot. King Arthur, the original commando. Marianne, was he wearing a kilt? No reference to kilts. I think he may have been potentially balls to the wall. Not sure. Unsure. Are they shipping Arthur and Merlin? Who knows? This is very excellent. A portrait believed to be of Lady Jane Grey, may be the only known depiction of her before her execution, which happened in 1554. This is researched by English Heritage that thinks that this portrait might depict the so-called 9-day queen. There is apparently compelling evidence that this is in fact a portrait of her. They used infrared reflectography, and they also worked with the Courtauld Institute of Art and a dendrochronologist to discover that changes have been made to the costume of this sitter, including her sleeves, her coif, and they also the white scarf that sits around her shoulders. Her eyes, which once looked left, now look to her right. At one point, her eyes and her mouth and her ears were scratched out, thought to have been an iconoclastic attack. An image of Grey in the National Portrait Gallery does have the same mask. The printed panel, the dendrochronology, dates to between 1539 to around 1571. The panel also has got a cargo or merchant mark, which is identical to the one used on the portrait of Edward VI. This, we're told, one of the senior collective conservators says, from the newly discovered evidence of a once perhaps more elaborate costume, the dating of the wooden panel was from within her lifetime, to the deliberate scratching of her eyes, it's possible we're looking at the shadows of a once more royal portrait of Lady Jane Grey, toned down into a subdued Protestant martyrdom after her death. The portrait is on loan from a private collection. It's going to be on display from Friday at Rest Park in Bedfordshire, along with 6 other paintings, including one of Rest's most prominent owners, Jemima Marchioness Grey. Philippa Gregory said, quote, "This is such an interesting picture posing so many questions. And if this is Jane Grey, a valuable addition to the portraiture of this young heroine as a woman of character, a powerful challenge to the traditional representation of her as a blindfolded victim." I mean, that is some red hair. That is some Tudor hair. However, there were a lot of redheads at the time and at court. But yes, it's if it is, how gorgeous, how amazing. Well, I mean, to me, that points to it being even more likely that it's a member of the family, because so Mary's aunt Mary, God, everyone's called Mary. Henry's daughter Mary, his aunt Mary, so Henry VIII's sister Mary. This is, of course, her granddaughter. So Mary would be her second cousin, first cousin once removed. And with the level of people being blood related to each other and reproducing in this time, I think there's a likelihood of similarities popping up, mayhap. I believe she's described in some cases as being golden red. What that means, does that mean blonde? Does that mean, I don't know. Right, next up, some Shakespeare. An Oxford University researcher has found a hidden copy of a Shakespeare sonnet. This is sonnet 116. And it was found while Dr. Leah Veronese, was researching for her DPhil at the Bodleian. It came as part of a miscellany. She says, quote, "As I was leafing through the manuscript, the poem struck me as an odd version of sonnet 116. When I looked in the catalogue, originally compiled in the 19th century, the poem was described, not inaccurately, as on constancy of love." It doesn't mention Shakespeare, though. I think the combination of the additional first line, self-blinding error sees these minds, and the absence of Shakespeare from the original catalogue description may be a reason why this poem has passed unnoticed as a copy of sonnet 116 all these years. So this is, rather than let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments, instead this one starts, self-blinding error sees all those minds who with false appellations call that love, which alters when it alteration finds. And then I think presumably it goes on from there. It sits amongst politically charged words, so banned Christmas carols, satirical poems, all connected to the tumultuous events of the 1640s. So we are talking, it's involved in Civil War propaganda. These new lines, self-blinding error sees all those minds who with false appellations call that love. These lines are added to create more verses to be sung. In the context of the Civil War, the lines could be read as an appeal towards religious and political loyalty. Professor Emma Smith, who is the Professor of Shakespeare Studies at the University of Oxford, she's a fantastic scholar, has said, quote, This exciting discovery shows that centuries of searching for evidence about Shakespeare and his early reception hasn't exhausted the archives. Let me not the marriage of true minds is now one of Shakespeare's most famous sonnets, but doesn't seem to have been very popular in his own time. Whereas other sonnets were widely circulated and quoted, only one previous reference to this one was known. And what Dr. Veronique shows in her investigation of this new version is the sonnet being understood in the context of royalist politics, a long way from its role in modern weddings. Her article is called A New Copy of Sonnet 116, a Cavalier cover version, and it's in the Review of English Studies. We're Goodwill finds, not Goodwill hunting, although if you are going Goodwill hunting, you may find a find. From Goodwill to Gold, a thrifted painting turns out to be a hidden treasure. This was bought for apparently $2.99, and it was the person apparently bought it because they liked the frame, and I don't blame them. The frame's gorgeous. Apparently, it's transformed into a nearly $2,000 windfall when it was discovered that when Marissa Macy of Cincinnati, Ohio, realized that she could auction this and get these $2,000, she realized that this was an original painting and not some high quality print. She noticed a plaque on this that had the name Johann Berthelsen on the frame, and a search pointed out this may well be a treasure. He was born in Copenhagen, Denmark. He trained as a singer, painting in his spare time, and painting soon became his primary source of incomes, and he did impressionist style paintings of New York in winter. This painting sold on the 19th of February for $2,875, including a buyer's premium, and the person who found it at Goodwill received a little under $2,000 for her once in a lifetime find, which is not bad considering she spent $2.99 on it. That's a fairly good markup. Well done, Macy. Well done. All of the apostle names are still very popular. This is talking about everyone being called Mary. I mean, it's not like I can really comment. I went full biblical with both of my kids. Well, or religious at least, Gabriel and Dominic. I mean, I fit right in Tudor England, I think. And let's be clear, Henry would have loved me. 2 boys, banged them out one after another. He wouldn't have liked my smart mouth, but apart from that, I don't know how I feel about this. This is a 4,000-year-old historic monument that could have buildings removed from it for archaeological research. This is the Marlborough Mound, the second largest Neolithic mound in Europe. It's 62 feet or 19 meters tall, and it's in the grounds of Marlborough College, Wiltshire, rumoured to be the legendary burial place of Merlin. The college has asked, and Marlborough College is richy rich, like it's poshy posh. It's very poshy posh school. They have applied for permission to demolish some of its buildings created in the 20th century. So the mound is much older than the buildings. These buildings were cut into the west side of the mound, and they want to replace them with structures to support the monument. They said this will also give you a chance for archaeologists to do some research on it. As a sign of how poshy posh Marlborough College is, this is where Catherine, Princess of Wales, was educated. So poshy posh. In 2024, an archaeological assessment described the mound as, quote, nationally important, and it's a prehistoric monument, but it's also got some 17th and 18th garden features. So I'm thinking follies is what I'm going to go with. They want to demolish these structures with an archaeologist present for the process, and they want to convert a garden pavilion to a small visitor information facility. The mound does have its own trust, the Marlborough Mound Trust, and the work's going to be carried out on their behalf. Opportunities to see the mound are limited to certain open days and pre-arrangements, as not only is it a school, there are also risks to the conservation, and spiral path to the top is not designed for heavy use. Wiltshire Council is expected to make a decision on the application by the end of April. So they don't know what they're going to find. There is a question about how archaeologically significant this might be. In normal terms, I would probably be a bit sort of twitchy about 17th and 18th century constructions being just pulled apart. But when they're in a prehistoric, or rather ancient monument like this, I don't know why, but I feel differently about it. Like, I'd be like, oh, that's potentially a 17th century or 18th century building. Mayhaps leave it alone. But when you consider the age of the thing it's been cut into, there's a part of you that goes, well, the original act of putting it in there is a bit of a desecration. I don't know how I feel about it. I feel conflicted, and I'll ruminate upon it, and I will perhaps come to some conclusion at some point. A stained glass mystery. There's been a breakthrough after an anonymous package was sent to a church. This is a window fragments are sent to a historic Scottish abbey. 49 shards came in November 2020, and they are part of the 950-year-old Dunfermline Abbey. It was addressed to the fictitious Bob Bruce. The package was opened, and it had fragments of glass wrapped in a copy of the Fife and Kinross Extra newspaper, dated to the 12th of February 2005. There was a typewritten note inside from an anonymous person who identified themselves only as Seeps, Ceeps, Seeps. They explained they discovered the glass near scaffolding 2 decades prior, and they had felt remorse for taking it. They wrapped it up to protect it and never had the chance to refer it. They didn't know if it was new glass coming in or old glass coming out. They felt a bit guilty taking it and hope it was going to get used. So they looked into it, and they've now identified the origin of the pieces. They were part of the church's so-called Margaret window, designed by Alexander Strachan and dating from 1932. It shows the marriage of Queen Margaret and King Malcolm Canmore, which took place in around 1070. The appeals for information had proved fruitless until a professor took a look at it, and they tested the shards. They used electron microscopy and X-ray fluorescence to identify the elements present, which included lead, potassium, arsenic, and sulfur, which meant that they were made between the 1870s and the 1930s. And then an expert stained glass conservator also had a look, and they came to this conclusion. The best guess is that the Margaret window was struck and damaged by a scaffolding pole during refurbishing work in the 1990s. But unless this Seeps character comes forward, the full circumstances behind the disappearance and reappearance will remain an intriguing part of the Abbey's history. Meanwhile, the name Bob Bruce is thought to be a playful reference to Robert the Bruce, whose remains are interred in the church. So the fun and games are over now, pals. We're in the last of our new news. I've got 2 articles before we head into the ding-dongs. We're transferring over to American politics, friends, and well, here we go. President Trump's layoffs leave more than 26,000 government-owned artifacts in limbo. Nearly half the art and historic preservation workers at the General Services Administration have been put on leave and are expected to be terminated. According to reporting by the Washington Post, a vast collection of public art pieces, some of which date to the 1850s, have been left unstewarded after at least 5 regional offices of the General Services Administration, the GSA, were shuttered earlier this month. Half of the nearly 40 employees in the GSA divisions devoted to artistic and historic preservation have been dismissed from their positions pending termination as a direct result of executive orders and imposing hiring freezes and staffing reductions. A GSA spokesman said the agency is, quote, making decisions to optimise the workforce for our future mission and remains committed to supporting impacted employees as they transition from federal service. One anonymous worker who described sudden layoffs to the Post as, quote, the rug being pulled out, cited specific work that had been left in administrative limbo. The 1941 Guildford Beale painting, Tropical Country, is temporarily absent from its post in the Interior Department building so that it may undergo conservation work. Now, with the GSA in limbo, the conservator is unsure of who he should contact about payment or the physical future of the object. Quote, there's been no planning or accounting or consideration for that, the staff have told the Post. It's supremely short-sighted. On March the 4th, GSA published a list of 443 non-core buildings that the agency intended to put up for sale, about 50% of its federal real estate holdings. The list was soon deleted, although a spokesperson for the GSA said it plans to republish the list soon, adding that the agency is, quote, exploring innovative approaches, including public-private partnerships, ground leases, sale leasebacks, and interagency co-working agreements to optimize our real property portfolio in support of the administration's executive order. These actions will result in increased service quality to our customers and savings to the American taxpayer. The day after GSA staff was placed on indefinite leave, the director of the agency Centre for Fine Art and the Art and Architecture Programme urged GSA workers who remained to upload their preservation histories into a shared folder. In an email obtained by the Post, it was written that this needs to be a priority. The Art and Architecture Programme has operated as a commissioning body for federal government since 1975. On the 29th of January, the President signed an executive order that rehabilitated a directive for a National Garden of Heroes. This is going to be 250 statues of historical figures that were shelved during his first administration. The Artists at Risk Connection, or ARC, a watchdog organisation advocating for artistic freedom, released a statement on the 7th of March decrying the, quote, purge of federal workforce under this administration. Quote, these historic artworks are part of America's cultural heritage and patrimony. They must be preserved and maintained. The federal government's done a move to sell and terminate leases on buildings housing these artworks, raises serious concerns about their fate, especially those permanently integrated into architectural structures such as frescoes and murals. The potential losses are incalculable. Hasn't stopped. We're going on. This is part of the Restoring Sanity executive order. President demands Smithsonian promote, quote, American greatness. This is a March 27th, so a few days ago, executive order aimed at reshaping the Smithsonian into a symbol, quote, of inspiration and American greatness. The order is titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. And Trump called for Vice President J.D. Vance, who automatically received a seat on the board, concurrent with the assumption of his executive branch role, to collaborate with Congress in eliminating federal funding for programming or exhibitions that, quote, degrade shared American values, divide Americans based on race, promote programs or ideology inconsistent with federal law. The Smithsonian has 21 museums, libraries, and research institutions, and they've also got the National Zoo in Washington. There's been an order to get rid of, quote, improper, divisive, or anti-American ideology. There's also been a demand for the Secretary of the Interior to restore federal properties, including parks and monuments that have been, quote, improperly removed or changed in the last 5 years to perpetuate a false revision of history. This is part of the president's drive to shape US culture to his tastes, as is seen in the January executive order prohibiting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that are federally funded organizations, and his takeover of the Kennedy Center, of which he's made himself board chair. And from what I've seen of that, that's going absolutely swimmingly in terms of both artists and audiences wanting to keep coming. So, well done. I don't. It's rare that I am rendered speechless but I think Wheezy, you've got it right. I think it's vandalism. That's actually possibly too kind a word to put on it. This has some, along with this has some very disturbing historical connections that are going on. I have keep safe. Whatever response for my friends who are watching this here in the US, whatever response you are formulating to these various maneuvers, stay safe. Stay safe. Get advice. Keep getting advice. Stay abreast of the changing remits. Yeah. Sending all my thoughts. We see and we care. We are Cambalarian. We're not. I didn't want to put it in ding dongs because in some ways, while the ding dong news is serious, it's also a kind of, there's a funny title to it, and I don't know. I felt like it needs to be in new news, but ding dong adjacent. I don't know. I wish I was the kind of clever where I could present a pathway, because let's be clear, it's not just the US. Their authoritarianism is on the rise in various places, and I wish I knew the answer. I think we just have to keep talking to each other. I think that the phrase "there's no profit in peace" clearly doesn't just attach itself to wars, like actual wars being fought. There is no profit for the collective in us being peaceful with each other. There is only profit for billionaires in keeping us all at odds with each other, whatever our political persuasions actually are. Because when it comes down to it, well, we might be squabbling about what a particular agenda means, or who's the worst option of this thing, that thing, the other thing. Nests are being feathered that aren't ours. Nests are being feathered that aren't ours, and there's no profit in peace for us. There's for them rather. There's profit in peace for us. There's profit in coming together to find a commonality, maybe even a common enemy, but fighting amongst ourselves. If your bank balance hasn't got numerous zeros at the end of it, global population number zeros at the end of it, you being peaceful with everybody else who's not in that bracket, if you're peaceful with them, there's profit for you. It's not for them though. Not for them though. On to ding dongs. Colorado resident sentenced after an incident at a Canyonlands archaeological site. A pair of residents were fined, given probation, and temporarily banned from Utah's public lands after pleading guilty to charges tied to a theft and disruption incident at an archaeological park at Canyonlands National Park last year. These are grown adults. Roxanne McKnight, 39, and Dusty Spencer, 43. Both of them should know better. of Durango, I'm sure if I've mispronounced that, Colorado, pled guilty in US District Court to charges of possessing or disturbing cultural or archaeological resources, as well as walking on or entering archaeological cultural resources, all of which were misdemeanor offences, the US Attorney's Office said on Friday. McKnight's been sentenced to a year of probation, banned her from entering from public lands in Utah for 1 year. Spencer's got a 2-year ban from Utah public lands with 2 years probation. They're also ordered to pay fines and restitution fees totaling $1,500. So a trail camera captured a man and woman entering a fenced-off area before handling numerous historic artifacts from the site. Antique nails were also apparently taken from the site. And this site does include many prehistoric artifacts, including rock markings from indigenous tribes who lived 6,700 to 700 years ago. Prosecutor says there are clear warnings prohibiting visitors from entering the area at the site. Samantha K, why would they do that? Look, COVID did something to people in terms of how they behave in public settings, in heritage sites. The utterly wild behaviour that I have experienced firsthand at castles and palaces from members of the public. Like, there was always the occasional, like, particularly when you're in costume, there was always the occasional individual who got a little bit handsy, who wanted to figure out what parts of you were real, particularly if you were wearing a bum roll. I know that I've had friends who people assumed that because they had a bum roll on, the front part of them, the ladies, also must be padded, and they sought to give it a shake to find out. That happened before COVID. Post-COVID, I have been threatened verbally. People have been shoved, jumped on, grabbed, groped, frequently. People have lost their minds. Stories about parents picking up children to touch tapestries. This does not surprise me, because people have, and Steve, you're right, there have always been Muppets, but the quantity and the rapidity that has been going on, it's just exploded. It's wild. It is wild what goes on. I've got a text in from the old husband. What's he said? Oh dear, my husband's got a joke for our American friends, and this does come from a place of love. My husband is the master of bad jokes and dad jokes. He says, what's the difference between a sinking canoe and an American beer? Less water in a canoe. He said America and Americans are different, and he says love to our cousins, our Americans, and to me as well. Thank you, darling. So yes, he's ragging on your beer. I apparently said with love and good humour. Yeah, Manda, I've heard about some of the stuff that goes on. I think there is, and I know also that people who work at like Disney, people who are friends with various characters, which I think is the word when you wear the costume, they have described some audaciously bad behavior. And maybe it's also a thing of, you have to be, when you're in costume, you are aware that you're always being filmed. But and when you're in an elaborate costume, people have always been interested to touch you and hug you and stuff like that. But we had ways and means of getting around it, because a lot of time we're wearing silk. So if people have got something on their hands, like even sun cream, it can damage the silk. So we would very much try to get them not to touch us. Also, if you're in Tudor garb and you're wearing a hood and it's pinned to your hair and you're covered in straight pins, you don't want members of the public to touch you because you're covered in sharps. So even if they're not being creepy, you don't want to put their arm around you because they could get poked, they could damage the silk, they could pull your hood off. Like, it's just don't touch people. But the hints are not being taken. People who want a picture with you think nothing of just taking you by the arm and dragging you where they want you, and forcefully as well. And those are good days. Those are good days. One Mysore. Yeah, I mean, I think I have heard it's happening everywhere. It is weird. It is weird. Samantha, I'm going to put that on the screen. I mean, yeah, look, the rise, there is a rise of bigotry in all of its forms. People are weirdly emboldened for things they're prepared to say to your face. We always used to say you'd only say this online. You're only brave enough to say this online, but actually they're not now. They're brave enough to say it to your face. Yeah. Irreplaceable. Vandals have destroyed ancient Californian artifacts and they are evading arrest. Authorities are seeking the public's help to find individuals who desecrated ancient protected tribal rock carvings near Bishop, California. These are petroglyphs, volcanic tableland. They were carved into the rock by the Bayeux Tapestry. I apologize if I've definitely mispronounced that. They were carved long before European settlers came to the American West. This is the unique geology on the eastern side of the Sierra was formed more than 700,000 years ago when a volcanic eruption created a rock plateau of pumice and ash known as Bishop Tuff. These petroglyphs depict humans, bighorn sheep, and in one case, a miner swinging a pickaxe. Three of these invaluable artifacts were recently vandalized. This is a destruction of irreplaceable national cultural heritage and art. There's now increased surveillance at the site, and they're determined to bring the responsible parties to justice. A $1,500 reward for information on the perpetrators has been issued. They want to know. So if you do know anything, please do get in touch at the links that are in this article. It's not the first time tribal art has been targeted. It happened in 2012 as well. Quote, cultural resources help tell the incredible story of America's history. The BLM, which is the Bureau of Land Management, encourages visitors to respect and protect America's heritage by leaving these resources the way they found them. Bronze Age Corsican statue sold at auction is apparently a fake. A granite megalith auctioned in London as a Bronze Age Corsican statue has been called a fake by French heritage cultural authorities. This was sold on the 13th of March. It's a 63 centimetre high statue sold through Lion and Turnbull by a Spanish dealer. It was sold for €22,500. Said to be from the end of the 3rd millennium BC, reminiscent of the steles found at the site of Filitosta, the south of the Mediterranean island, which are among the first known human-like statues. The work of our historians within this community has said that it allows us to affirm that this is a fake without any possible doubt. This is a member of the Corsican council in charge of culture and heritage. They can unequivocally state there's no way this carving could be authentic and that it is instead a pale copy. It's described as a crude fabrication. It is much too small and has nothing to do with the proportions of any of the 100 known statues of this kind in Corsica. The face is quite rudimentary and the style of the arm and eyes indicates it is a recent work. He added that the expected protuberances indicating the presence of a helmet on the ears are missing. He was surprised. The archaeologist involved said he was surprised that he had not been consulted before the sale, which could have avoided a lot of trouble. Yeah. Around 800 megalithic monuments have been found on Corsica to date, with approximately 100 of those being menhirs with a human face, featuring a prominent chin as well as eyebrows and a nose formed in a T shape. The historical function of them is a matter of debate, but it is suggested they were created, quote, to honour the military elites gaining access to lands and natural resources. They are adorned with swords, daggers, shields, helmets, and other armour. But this, apparently, is not one of them. Oh, I bet whoever's bought that is livid. And also, the auction house. The auction house got to be embarrassed. The seller has... Everybody's having a bad day in this circumstance. Talking about bad days, and we're going to hop to events and exhibitions, alas, and a cancellation. This is part of the DEI crackdown. The Art Museum of the Americas in Washington, D.C. has now cancelled 2 major exhibitions. They were intended originally to showcase Black and LGBTQ plus artists. This is based upon the executive orders. One exhibition that you could have seen that's now been cancelled was entitled Before the Americas. It was set to open 10 days ago on the 21st of March. It was going to feature 40 works by Afro-Latino, Caribbean and African-American artists. It was curated by Washington-based artist Cheryl D. Edwards, highlighting migration, colonialism, and the African diaspora's cultural impact. I'm going to say these names. So it was going to be curated once again by Cheryl D. Edwards. The artists featured among them were Wilfredo Lamb, Elizabeth Catlett, and Amy Sherald, who is the portraitist of former First Lady Michelle Obama. So one thing we can do is send lots of traffic to their various social medias and their sites. What we can do is share and celebrate their work in our online spaces and amplify their voices that way. The Edwards told Hyperallergic that leadership informed her that the administration had labelled the exhibition as a, quote, DEI programme and event, and had withdrawn funding from it that was earmarked by the Biden administration. The museum's director apparently called her up and said, I've been instructed to call you and tell you that the museum show is terminated. She pointed out that nobody uses that word in art, terminated. The second cancelled exhibition was entitled Nature's Wild with Andil Gozine. It focused on queer theory and colonial law in the Caribbean, with multiple LGBTQ artists, including a centerpiece video installation by the late Lorraine O'Grady. Gozine told the Washington Post he was informed of the decision on February 5th without further explanation. There are similar cutbacks across all federally funded institutions. There was a cancelled concert in celebration of World Pride Day featuring the Gay Men's Chorus of Washington. This is one thing we can do, where when creators who have worked in these fields are silenced by policies like this, one thing we can do is we can amplify them as best we can socially, through our social medias, through our communities. There will be exhibitions of their work. Go and see them. Put bums on seats. Ticket sales where one can, and vote with your wallet. Vote with your wallet. Heading over to Rome, Caravaggio 2025. If you are going to be in Rome between the 7th of March, so already happening, and the 6th of July 2025, so a relatively short phase, you can check out Caravaggio 2025 at the Gallery Nazionale in Rome, Italy. So if you're into Caravaggio, if you're into being in Rome, have a lovely touch of it over there. In New York, the Jewish Museum is hosting the following: the Book of Esther in the Age of Rembrandt. That's going from March the 7th to August the 10th, 2025. So all of these exhibition links with ticket sales and all the information there is linked in the description box attached to the numbered slide number that you see there. Where I have found accessibility information, you will also see that linked as almost like a sub bit. So there's a numbered list, and then beneath that number will be A, so a lettered bit. That's for accessibility. When it comes to the Caravaggio exhibition, the accessibility information is sparse and it's all on the same page as the one that's linked, so I didn't link it separately. With the others, there are separate accessibility pages, so do check those out. We also have Chicago in the US, Myths and Marble, Ancient Roman Sculpture from the Torlonia collection. This is the Art Institute of Chicago, and that is running from March 15th to June 29th, 2025. Last but by no means least, this is my fun plan for this week. This is what I'm hoping that is all going to go well, despite me having a wisdom tooth out. The London Museum, which is what the Museum of London is now called. So it was the Museum of London, it's now the London Museum. Their Dockland site, because their main site, which was at Barbican, closed because they're moving. They have a second site that I love, the Dockland site. If you are in London, the Dockland site is fabulous. It's talking about kind of trade and empire, but it's also great if you have got small kiddies, because they have a downstairs gallery called Mudlarks, and it's like a soft play come, London Museum interactive history space. You do have to book your place there, but a few years ago, so before Dominic was anywhere on the horizon, we took Gabriel down there and he had the time of his life. He had a brilliant time there. So talking about Mudlarks, this exhibition is the first major exhibition dedicated to mudlarking, and my plan is to do something a little bit experimental for a video, and hopefully I'll be able to edit it for Friday. If not, I'll do it for the following week. I'm going to try and do a really tight turnaround on this so that it goes out, because the exhibition is going live on the 4th. I'm very excited. I wrote to them and said, I really like mudlarking. Please, may I come to your exhibition and talk to people there who've been involved in making it? And they actually very kindly invited me to the press launch. So I'm very chuffed about that. And I am hopefully going to get a chance to talk to some people who are involved in the exhibition. And I'm thinking that could be a really cool video, essentially with me in the field, let's go and do this. And it's the sort of thing that I would love to do more of, go to historic sites, interview curators there and things like that. So if this video goes well, if it's the sort of thing you like, do let me know in the comments of it. And if you've also got suggestions of other places that you'd like me to reach out to, then please do put that in the comments of the video that's going to be going up about this exhibition. And yeah, it's kind of like a vlog day. And I don't normally do vlogs. Obviously, you will have noticed that from my channel, because I figure I don't do enough interesting things. But this is an interesting thing. So I figure that it might be fun to have a vlog. Also, this exhibition opens on the 4th of April, 2025. And this one's running for a long time. It's going to be open until the 1st of March, 2026. The Museum of London Docklands is next to Canary Wharf, and Canary Wharf is, it's a kind of financial hub and all that kind of stuff. But there are some really cool restaurants around there, and there are some really nice food trucks as well. And in the summer, they do all sorts of cool different things on the water that's still there. So you can get in one of those like circular dinghy things with a barbecue, which feels nuts to me, but people seem to have a lovely time and they float about and all sorts of things like that. Carol's suggestion here: Bliss Till Museum and the Iron Bridge in Telford. I will make a note of that. Thank you very much. I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to take a little photo of the comment just so I remind myself to put it on my list. Because, yeah, I'm definitely up for, there we go, taking a photo. I'm up for reaching out to people. This is the thing. I decided that 2025 was going to be my year of being brave and remembering that if you don't ask, you don't get. And I've always been a bit scared to approach museums and exhibition sites and be like, hi, can I please bring my little YouTube channel there? Because I always thought people would go, no, of course you can't. Stop it. Don't be ridiculous. But then I reached out to one, which is like a big institution, and they were like, yes, please come. So, yeah, I'm excited. And yeah, I did speak years ago. I made a video on mudlarking because I had a friend who I went with a mudlark with a license, and we went and looked, and it was brilliant. It was great fun. So cool. Right, that's what I have for you today. Thank you ever so much. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, hasn't it? Emotions. We've been up and down. We've been all over the shop. I've unleashed some of my deepest, darkest fears. We've gone into the doldrums of political misery. It's been a wild ride. Thank you for sticking along with me. Oh, Curiosities. That is a good one. I blimmin' well love the Wallace collection as well. I do love a sword a lot, in fact. And in my misspent youth, when I was doing some historical European martial art, it was one of the Wallace collection swords, a replica of that the company I worked with used to fence with. So I very much like the Wallace collection. Thank you very much. Excellent ideas. Fabulous. So, friends, regular Friday videos will be happening. One of them will be my trip to the Museum of London Docklands, and we will be back in a month, and we will see who we are. But we have this, we have each other. We will chat in our comment sections when we premiere the videos. We've got a space we can have our live chat, we can talk to each other, and we can have a little bit of respite and a little bit of, and we'll have a little bit of a nice time while we can. So please do like the stream. Please leave comments as well as in this chat, which has been great. Please also leave comments in the description box, maybe some emojis. All of that interaction is great stuff. If you like this sort of thing, do let your mates know that I do these live streams. Bring them on down. And yeah, please do subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon. That should tell you when I upload. It should tell you when I'm going live. It doesn't always. Do go over to my website, www.katrinamarchant.com. It's linked in the description box because you can also sign up to my mailing list through that. It's also got links to some of my favorite videos that I've done, and also it's got links to my merch store over there too. Fabulous. Well, friends, and Siggy, thank you. I'm glad. It's lovely of you to say that, and we're very pleased to have you. And as Makeup Monarchy says, welcome. We are one thing. There's lots of things that I love about this community, and principal among them is how kind everybody is to each other and to me, because I am a delicate little flower. I'm very, very, very soft and vulnerable, and so how lovely everyone and supportive is to me and to each other, and how nice this is. It always perks me right up. So thank you all very, very much. And I have to say, just want to hark back that when this channel started, and I will get off because I've been blathering at you for 2.5 bloody hours. I'm sorry. When this started, this channel started as a hobby for me to share my historical knowledge. And I was having the best chats ever. And then when the pandemic hit and I lost my job in heritage because everything closed, and I was pregnant for the first time, and it was super scary. The world shut down the day after my 12-week scan. So I was getting more and more pregnant in a lockdown, in a global pandemic where I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from. And that time leading up to the birth of my son, and I think also postpartum, which again gave birth in the September. It was a really scary time. Having this place to come and talk about history and get in the comic section, I cannot express how much this saved my mental health, and in many ways allowed me to keep myself on an even keel for the new baby I was bringing home. Like the mum that Gabriel got, having even a little bit of her stuff together, as much as I ever did have, is thanks to this community, and it continues on. And I'm so incredibly grateful for it. So incredibly grateful for it. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for giving up your time consistently, but especially today. And thank you for welcoming me and for welcoming each other. It really does mean ever so much. So without further ado, I will see you all next time. I hope that whatever you're doing, whatever part you're in your week, whatever time of day it is for you, that you are having a great start to your week and that you will have a great week going forward. I will look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. But for now, it's goodbye from me.